in a mission far away, where the nights were cold and long. A doctor held a tiny life against his heart so strong.
No machines could understand what nature always knew.
A mother's touch, a baby's need, a bond forever true.
From the fragile and the small, a quiet revolution grew.
Skin to skin for every child, the way life starts anew. Hold me close 1,000 seconds, heart to heart we beat as one. Zero separation, let life's journey be begun. Nurture science is calling in the oxytocin flow. In these arms the world is born, and love will help it grow. 1,000 minutes, turning moments into years. Love and bonding starts right here. No more waiting all alone behind the incubator's gleam. Lover's chest, the perfect place where growing humans know. First 1,000 seconds, then 1,000 minutes more. Building trust from the very start of life's shore.
Nature's ancient wisdom guides the dance they're born to do.
Hold me close 1,000 seconds, heart to heart we beat as one. Zero separation, let life's journey be begun. Nurture science is calling in the oxytocin flow. In these arms the world is born, and love will help it grow. 1,000 minutes, turning moments into years. Healthy bonding starts right here. From Zimbabwe's healing wars to the world beyond the sea,
A simple truth became a movement, how life was meant to be.
not mother here and baby there, but together from the start. One biology, one story, one connected beating heart. Hold your baby skin to skin. Let the old ways fade away. Nurture science lights the path to a brighter day. 1,000 seconds, minutes, days.
Zero separation. Biology, one heart, one story just begun.
Zero separation. too.
In my early training, we watched old grainy black and white film of babies in hospital, where the argument was not whether the baby should have skin to skin contact, but whether the baby should be visited at all outside the 30 minutes in the evening that was customary in America for many, many years.
And I was born like that, you want to know?
You say you were born like that?
Well, in Sweden, I was whisked away and I was brought every 3 hours.
Ah,
Yeah. So,
born
yeah,
in 1955, you were. Is that right?
yes.
Mm-hmm.
And my father is a doctor also. He was a doctor, but he grew up in southern Rhodesia
Oh my.
and did medical school in Cape Town, South Africa. And then he came to Sweden because he was from Swedish parents and met my mother and married her. And then he got Swedish registration. And in the middle of this, I was born. And so the professor made a special space for my mother in his private ward, where I got the best possible care in 1955.
Best possible care away from her.
Of course.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yes. Anyway, so
So how did you end up then in Cape Town again?
so I grew up. So my father married my mother there in Sweden, but he went back and was a missionary himself. So
Oh,
my grandfather was a missionary and my great grandfather.
my goodness.
And so my great grandfather worked in Eritrea, my grandfather in Zululand in South Africa, and then in southern Rhodesia. My father was born in what is now Zimbabwe. And from there, he did his medical school. I grew up in Zimbabwe. I was born in Sweden, but after that, all my sisters are born in Zimbabwe. So I went to school there, I trained there, I got into medical school in Cape Town. Then I did the same thing. I came to Sweden and got Swedish registration, but I'd found a beautiful girl before that in Cape Town.
For goodness
So,
sakes.
yes.
Your grandfather and your great grandfather, were they also physicians?
My father was. My grandfather was not, but when he was a corporal in the army, and he told his commanding officer that he was going to the mission field. And as a corporal, he was in charge of the first aid box, a big chest. And so the commanding officer gave him the big chest to do work in Zululand. So he was called doctor by the local people, and he did first aid adequately for army training.
Was there never much doubt that you were going to be a missionary and a doctor?
It was not an expectation at all from my grandfather or my father. It became my own choice, but modeled obviously on my father, who was a wonderful man, and my grandfather. So, but being a missionary also necessarily requires your own faith and commitment and calling.
Which you had?
So yes, I grew up in a faith in Zimbabwe, but when I came to medical school, I encountered a very different, more alive faith that required more a personal experience with Jesus Christ and Holy Spirit experience, and it affirmed a direction that that period affirmed the direction that I had set off on to be a doctor. Yes.
So when did it dawn on you that this skin-to-skin contact thing was not only important, but provably important?
So, well, briefly, the story. I, from medical school and this early certainty that I was going to be mission doctor, I knew that I was very likely going to work on my own. And so nowadays, there's a specialty called rural medicine, where you learn the basics of setting bones and opening a chest and closing it. And so I spent 6 years after my medical school doing orthopedics, surgery, anesthesia, obstetrics, neonatology, pediatrics, so that I had a primary care grounding in broad spectrum of healthcare. And I enjoyed that. I like doing operations. It's a bit like carpentry. Of all the professions, orthopedics was the one that I kind of most enjoyed, and my mentors really wanted me to stay there. But I was doing this still with the same purpose. And then we joined the church. At that stage, it was called the Church of Sweden Mission. And they did a half-year preparation, some of which was the logistics and the bureaucracy and nuts and bolts of the church functions and so on. But they also paid for me to attend a diploma in child health in Uppsala University. There were about 20 people. And one of them we met was my wife and I, a midwife, Agneta. And during the 10 weeks, we learned that we were going to, the 10-week diploma course, we learned that we were going to be going to the same mission hospital. So that was one. But we then also had to do a mini thesis. And she did her mini thesis on kangaroo mother care, 1987. In 1987, there were five publications on the topic. That was all. And so she was in a group of 4 midwives, and they summarized this and described it. And there wasn't much instruction, so that was fun. But then when we came to the mission hospital 2 or 3 months after the end of the course, we all shared our topics, and part of the course you learn from each other's work. And there was a baby born 1,000 grams, and the nurses kind of had a routine of very quietly taking care of it so that the mother didn't bother because it had no expectation of being alive. But we said we can do this.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just caught on. So you're saying they did this because they thought they were protecting the mother because she was going to lose this baby anyway?
This baby was going to die. So they didn't, that was and still in many parts of the world, that's how small babies are seen in the rural areas. And anyway, so even then, there wasn't a cemented idea about this that I'm going to tell you, but there was a kind of expectation that the baby had to be able to tolerate skin-to-skin contact.
I caught that verb. You used that verb a lot in your articles.
And the tolerating was that because these doctors worked with babies who are unstable, and when you touch them, they jolt. And then when they had stabilized when they tolerated being handled, they started them in skin to skin. So this idea they had to first become stable so they could tolerate skin to skin contact. That wasn't set in stone then. And so we didn't have the incubators. Agneta was trained in Lund, one of the big universities here in Stockholm, as did neonatal care. So I had done some months where neonatology was included in my pediatrics. So we both knew what a small neonate looked like and did. So we said, we'll look after this baby exactly like we've been taught, but we just do it in skin to skin.
And are you saying in part that was because you didn't have incubators, or were
We
you
did not.
glad to not have incubators?
We did not have them. We didn't even have electricity some of the time. We had a generator that we could start when I needed to do a cesarean section.
But then the criticism could be leveled at you later that in that primitive situation, skin to skin made sense, but in a real hospital, where you have lots of equipment and people, of course you'd want the baby away from the mother.
Of course, that was said, you're right. But on an objective sense, that baby survived. And Agneta ensured that it got exclusively mother's own milk. In the beginning, we did a little bit of adding of dextrose, because that's what one could do in those days. But really, she worked hard as a midwife to ensure that mothers had sufficient milk for those babies. And it was 1988. It was exactly the beginning of the HIV epidemic. And so she also felt, no, the risk of this HIV, she doesn't want donor milk even, which would have been available. So these babies got mother's own milk, all of them. And the paper that we then published after that was 126 babies, where the overall survival rate was 67%. But when you looked at the very low birth weight babies, it had previously, that's between 1,000 grams and 1,500 grams, it had previously been 10%. 1 out of 10 of those babies survived. With this place of care, with exactly the same care protocol in the Zimbabwe Essential Drugs Action Program that wrote exact details and provided the medicines, and by 2 very well qualified Dutch doctors who was there before. So they got the best care that was possible at that time. The survival rate, instead of being 10%, became 50%. But the human touch that you're asking for, there was a difference in those babies. Yes, they survived, but their heads had a round shape. They weren't lying on a cot, and they had a firmer, drier skin, but they were alive. They were awake, and they could make sustained eye contact, eye-to-eye contact.
So they were thriving, not just surviving.
Exact words. And this was evident. This was clearly so. And so I've sort of written that there was an awareness that this was different. Then I was involved in scorpion research, and I was doing tuberculosis a lot, and we were doing home-based care for HIV, and we were visiting 11 clinics that served 250,000 people. And I hardly had time to attend to the skin-to-skin contact kangaroo mother care for the next 6 years. It worked beautifully, and it doesn't need a lot of care. Yes, I would do ward rounds every day. Occasionally, I gave some NSID to a baby that I thought had a murmur and a PDA, and we did the neonatology but it wasn't needed very much.
Mhm. So back up a minute. In America, there's always been a great tension between physicians and midwives. And I don't hear a drop of that in your voice when you speak of this woman this midwife that you said about working with. Why not? Why was there such trust on your part of her?
At that time, I'm not sure that I could have formulated an answer to you. Now, I can perhaps, although it might be long-winded and obscure. So look at it like this. In that article which I sent you, there is a fixation, there is a, let me begin with ethical argument. First, do no harm, non-maleficence. And we measure harm by risk reduction. And therefore, we get an objective handle on risk reduction. And that is how we deal with pathology. We're, after all, doctors. And the doctoring involves identifying a diagnosis, monotherapy for that. And so we reductionist and we narrow down on a problem. And evidence-based medicine is the epitome of that practice. What I then argued, and which I got to understand in the 6 years that I worked in the rural remote mission hospital, this is a disease approach. It's not a health approach. I was trained in disease. At the University of Cape Town, I got excellent training in disease. Because of the apartheid structure, I was being able to see in beds, first world, third world, and everything in between, and have hands-on experience of what they looked like and what they felt like. And I could recognize and make a diagnosis. But when I was responsible for 250,000 people and traveling around the countryside, I realized I knew nothing about health. Now, health.
But you understand that even that statement you just made is peculiar in many medical circles. For a physician to say, "I knew nothing," is almost illegal in this country. I'm curious about what it is in you that lets you be ignorant and not die from it, that lets you believe in and work side by side with a midwife.
I'll stay with that. But let me first say that, yes, what you're describing from my perspective, as I've then later said this, there was a 2-year period when I did 200 grand rounds in Canada and the United States. And what I encounter, I would call a profound arrogance, a total blinkering to new information. Yes, what you're describing. The midwife, however, I'm going back a step, keeping my straight line, if you don't mind, Michael. The midwife actually understands health in a different way to disease. She's working with physiology. So what the ethical bifurcation is, non-maleficence is the single ethical axiom we follow. It's balanced by an ethical axiom called beneficence, the obligation to do good. And the obligation to do good is as much against beneficence, against that, as pathology is to physiology. And to answer your question, now I'm getting a bit roundabout, but the physiology should come first. This is a chance thing. Sometimes these things are not so chance. I do some readings in the morning, and here I'll tell you a quote from a Johnson. Do you remember? No, you don't remember Johnson because here was Samuel Johnson, 18th century writer. Hear this. He says, what is new is opposed. Because most are unwilling to be taught, and what is known is rejected. And this, because it is not sufficiently considered that men more frequently require to be reminded than informed. And we need to be reminded of physiology. The whole medical profession builds with physiology, but only plays with pathophysiology.
Why did you not have to be reminded to avoid arrogance?
You stick on this, Michael.
I'm really curious about that. Because I don't think every physician would have been in the same place you were at the same time and reached the same conclusions. And I'm fascinated by that.
I might answer that at different levels. It requires a deep psychotherapy to understand that, Brett. But look here. There were several things. Perhaps one of it's modeled on my father. He was a solo doctor all those years. And he had three Swedish missionary qualified nursing sisters. And there were, at the end of the time, there were also two locally qualified nursing sisters, 5. They were actually the ones who ran the hospital and who did the hospital and who did the care. One of them, my father was confident, would do a cesarean section. And they could do the forceps and all the suctions and the things because he wasn't there all the time. And so there was necessarily a level of trust. Here I'm still staying in the pathology arena. I didn't then understand or see that this was the working of health. But that the doctor has to be God, I had no immediate model for. I encountered it later.
Did you have a model for doctor as not God
My father?
From your father? Is that right? Huh.
He had a God that he believed in, and he would be able to extend a level of trust. He could do that to his nurses. He could do that to me as his child and my sisters.
So he treated you that way as well.
Yes.
As if what you had to say was interesting and to be paid attention to.
For example, I was home on holiday, and he comes after breakfast, and during breakfast he says, "Look, the boiler for the hospital. There was a steam boiler, a massive big machine that could do the laundry and the autoclave and cook all the food and everything. Do you want to go and look at it? Why isn't it working?" I was 16.
Oh my goodness.
So off I go with a pipe spanner, and in fact, I did work out what was wrong with it. There was a little apricot pip stuck in a valve. So when I took that pip out, found that it was there and got it out, it worked. And the man did not have to drive half a day to come from the city and do that.
But a boy got to walk away feeling pretty proud.
I didn't have time for that. I had next thing to do.
Oh.
There were lots of fun things to do. So yes, and my father trusted me to drive when I was tall enough to reach the pedals. So there was a kind of, but that was also in a very rural area. It was also remote.
Sure.
And he had grown up like that with his father.
Um,
So, yeah.
So this story of skin to skin contact is actually also a story of um, little boys being lifted up by their fathers, believed in by their fathers, trusted by their fathers.
Yes, in a way. But I have another take on it. I have another take on it, for which I need to tell you another story.
Uh-huh.
As I say, I didn't spend much time with the skin to skin. Yes, I would come in there and regularly, as one would in any pediatric ward, even at night. The first 6 hours we fought for those babies. I didn't sleep for the first few hours. I was right there and on them. And then they stabilized, they transitioned. And after that, they did survive.
Were these
Uh,
all low birth weight babies?
These were babies above 1,000 grams
Okay.
and between 1,000 and 1,500.
Yeah. Mhm.
So they're 28 to 30 weeks and bigger. The bigger ones we never worried about. They just did fine. So a bigger baby is above 1,500 grams in our book.
And bigger babies in that hospital did not get skin to skin contact?
All babies got skin to skin contact.
Huh.
So this is part of this kind of arrogant wheel that is stuck in an evidence-based medicine rut, because it only looks at evidence.
Mm.
And for evidence, you have to narrow down a reductionist question. The difference between pathology and physiology, and be a little bit quip here, but this is how I've tried to formulate it. In pathology, you find one thing wrong and you fix it. In physiology, you've got to find everything right. And everything has to be in place. Yeah? And so each of the steps, the environment, it's coming together, everything. This pathology fails to do. So now when we do evidence for full-term babies, we're looking for pathology evidence in a healthy population. It's not there at the 0.5 level, 0.05 level. It is there, but it doesn't express in disease. It expresses in maladaptation. And this I try and convey in that article the 3 articles, in fact, that I've written. So it will not show as pathological evidence, but it will show in other ways. So therefore, even now, I am one of my crusade hats. Full-term babies get skin to skin for 1 hour only. Maybe 2 if there's a generous environment. Then they are separated. Now, the full-term baby shows enough harm from being separated in the first hour that we label it evidence. Now, suddenly, after the first hour, it must tolerate separation. But actually, the nurture science, which I call it, the brain development science, how it works is our normal biology, rooted, embedded, coded in our DNA. That wires into our brains. Our brains makes a behavior. That is exactly why all babies thrive, the word you also used, thrive. And full-term babies should thrive. But a very small baby doesn't thrive. In fact, it may not even survive if it doesn't have all that which the full-term baby should have. So when I describe skin-to-skin contact and nurture science and how it works, it's the biology of all babies. Now, a big baby tolerates some separation, still makes adaptations, but the small baby doesn't tolerate separation.
I love the way you hinted, without clobbering us on the head with it, that adaptation is not without cost. I never thought about it quite that way. I'm called upon often to describe why a certain baby does all right psychologically and developmentally, and another one does not. But this idea of yours was a new one to me.
So the life history theory does convey this. I haven't invented it. Life history theory then presents that the adaptation is a necessary way of making a best guess about how one needs to be in one's future environment. And the best guess you have to make now. And so a term that's used in life history theory is very early, once off, and forever. And this relates to specific signaling hormones. Cortisol is a famous one, but there's 12 at least that are more specific hormones which signal to the baby, this world is short of calories. This world is actually quite tough. You're going to have to manage this on your own. This world, and those signals are adaptations. They can, therefore, be good, but they become exactly bad without changing if you made a wrong guess about the environment.
And a very big deal in my world, working with developmental and psychological problems in babies and toddlers, is that those adaptations, the baby, how can I say, forgets to stop using them when they're no longer needed.
Correct. The baby is wired to do that.
Yeah.
There's a coding, and then there's an epigenetic wiring. So the code allows for options. And then there's an epigenetic mechanism that makes a brain wiring. Your circuits are very hard to change. I'm telling you a story.
Go ahead.
So I did want to pick this up. So I didn't spend much time with the skin-to-skin contact, but we had scorpions a lot where I was working, deadly scorpions. And there were a young woman, a 6-year-old girl, and an old 70-year-old man within a space of a few weeks died. Girl in the hospital and the man at home. And what we could see from observing and from cases that they didn't all die, obviously, many cases, it didn't fit the textbook at all. Now, why didn't I trust the textbook? There's your question, Michael. Yes, there's a certain irreverence for authority. You're looking for something like that.
Much needed irreverence.
And so I want to know, I want to understand things. I want to, yes, I want to be told, but I want to be able to understand. And so what we saw did not match the textbook. And so I launched into a study. I had no particular plan except to solve a problem. And we drew, I think I sent some pictures on my PowerPoint. And I drew my wife drew a scorpion on the computer, which in 1987 wasn't much computer, 89. And then 4 languages. If a scorpion stings you, bring it to the hospital. And and it happened to be a very dry year, lots of scorpions. And here, my father had built this hospital. He worked there 17 years, and I went back to work there. And so my father was part of the population, part of the fabric. I still have family that are African families that have given names to my children. And so when Dr. Bergman asked for something, then you must do it. So 480 people were stung by scorpions in those 2 years. And 56% of them brought the scorpion. That would never have been without my father. So it allowed that I could match the clinical profile of identified scorpions from the Natural History Museum with clinical pictures. And I did full neurological examinations on all of those patients until they were healthy, sometimes twice a day. Sometimes it took a whole week before they recovered. And so I very carefully examined them, neurology and all the other symptoms. And in this way, I could then go back with the results from the museum and say, here is the scorpion. Half of the bites, more than half, comes from it, and it makes that syndrome. And now very few come from this scorpion, but they are very sicker than those ones. But the number of deaths are the same from both of those scorpions. And all the other scorpions cause disease, syndrome, others cause just pain. So, and you still want to know where this is going, huh? Watch. And so there were, in the literature, autonomic storm. So there's a parasympathetic, sympathetic system, and the autonomic storm stimulates both to make a deadly condition. And this was the literature. And there was lots of research, and I had about 100 publications that I got help from town to look at. And then I would read the research they did and their results, but I would not read their conclusions. Yes, I would look at their conclusions, but I made different conclusions from the same results. Long story now. The one scorpion actually produced a pure sympathetic, fast heart rate, different saliva, and a death from damming up of the lungs, and they had, and the other scorpion was parasympathetic, had a bradycardia, and they died of fatal syncope. So it wasn't autonomic storm that killed them. What I could then see, I was able to take very old ink scratchy ECGs from an ECG machine that was 30 years old when I started with it, from the 1960s, probably when the hospital was built. But I used that. And actually, the cause of death is not autonomic. It's a cardiomyopathy that causes a stiff heart. So purely by solving this problem, I had a lot of data that I kind of reflected on that should be a thesis. And there is a mechanism in the British medical hierarchy of a doctorate by thesis, doctor of medicine, medical doctor. So I actually packed all this together as an MD, which is the same as a PhD in the United States. And it was presenting novel descriptions of two conditions and a solution to what was the underlying cause that also explained the death syndromes of 40 other species in the world. I could map them on a parasympathetic sympathetic scale and on a cardiomyopathy scale. So that was fun. I could work out a problem.
You always had a lot of imagination, I suspect.
I have to imagine things, but I also have to see if they're true. Now, keeping the straight line. At that time, that occupied a huge last 2 years of my time in Zimbabwe. Writing a thesis was a thick book like this. I have it here somewhere still. And it's all there. And then there's also 3 publications, each on the story. That took up 2 years of my time. And then I spent, when I finished that, I spent 3 or 4 weeks pulling together all the cases from the kangaroo mother care. And you would think they have nothing to do with each other. And you're nodding slowly, yes. I'm presenting it to you like this. Life isn't always a straightforward path. And I thought I was going to live all my life out in Zimbabwe. I would be happy if that happened. But the church fired us. Another sad story. And the country deported us. This wasn't what I had expected or planned. So at short
Was it
notice,
a big noisy controversy or just a quiet shuffling out the door?
No noise, just informed that we're no longer having our contracts renewed. No interviews, just information, and a denial of a residence permit.
That produced great sadness for you and your wife?
At that time, yes. And sudden, what do I do now to have a salary to feed my children and all the rest? But I had realized, as I told you, that yeah, I can do disease, but I am actually really going to have more impact if I can do health. And so primary healthcare, health education. At the University of Cape Town, there was a school of public health with the disease focus that I knew from my alma mater. But there was also the University of the Western Cape, where a man called David Sanders had started a school of public health, which focused on primary healthcare. So I did a master's in public health there. And it was such that they encouraged people in the civil service, and you could get 50-50 leave, 50 your own leave, and 50 you were granted study leave. And it was at a very affordable rate that an ex-missionary on a civil service salary could afford. And so I did that course and loved it. But in it, I had to do a thesis also. And so, yes, I can do a thesis on this kangaroo mother care. Skin-to-skin contact. And now I got access to a library and I could get articles. And I started reading. And why do we separate mothers and babies? So what's the science of separation? This is not a question you're allowed to ask because there's no science of separation. Separation is a paradigm. Separation is a given truth, unquestioned fact. Well, it's not a fact. Well, it's a fact that we do it. But what's underlying? So what I could find very quickly and very easily, an extensive literature on primate, non-human primate separation. And I was able to understand that literature in a very different way, because when I wrote the thesis on scorpions, I had to read Goodman and Gilman. It's a book this thick. Half of it is about the autonomic nervous system, because I had to explain these two systems. So when I read the autonomic nervous system and I read how the primate separation works, I understand it clearly. And so that scorpion experience, serendipitous, seemed totally unrelated to the scorpion, to the skin-to-skin contact. But I see it in the retrospectoscope that both of these were gifts from God. I had this experience of the kangaroo mother care, skin to skin, and it worked. And I got this scorpion study. The one led to a master's in public health, the other to a doctorate, neither of which were my career goals, but both of which have been tools necessary to be able to speak with authority. So this, yes, it was a grief, it was a loss to be expelled from a country. That was my home country where I was happy to stay. And yet, it took some years for me to realize also in my faith walk that this was meant to be, that there was a higher purpose, and that this master's in public health and this PhD look good. Yeah, okay, good. People listen because I have them, but I also have a message in them. So I have really felt that this has been a calling. In church speak, a missionary is sent, and you will have a sending service. But you can also be called. So I feel that I've had both of those. And so the conviction, the certainty that what I'm saying is true comes from this grounding, my faith. But my faith has gone through a journey of learning, of observing, of discovering, of interpreting, where many times the particular insights have been flashes, moments. Yes, one processes things and what happens in one's subconscious. But many times I kind of said, yeah, good on you. This fits. And in a way that it fits, it's God's creation. And I have a sense also where restoring God's creation is one of the biblical truths.
Restoring.
So the whole Bible truth is that when God created the world, it was good. It was good. Chapter 1 says it's good. At the end of chapter 2, it's good. And then it went sour. So the whole message is to restore the creation.
I almost think that verb would apply to your take on why separation should not be the natural order of things, why it isn't. You're really just restoring the connection that was already there.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the DNA code.
So before we run out of time, I'm nervous about that, and I'm so eager to hear your thoughts. You can not go here if you don't want to, because it's a stretch. But I wonder if you have any thoughts about the implication of SSE for example, postpartum depression or maternal self-efficacy. In other words, do you think, in addition to this SSE having a profound impact on the baby, do you think it has a profound impact on the mother?
Absolutely.
Mm.
And so, um, yeah, when I was 65, when I was 50 years old, I resigned my civil service job. And then I have been talking this way for the last 20 years. 5 years ago, just a bit more, the IKMC study by the World Health Organization was completed. And it led to policy that says skin to skin should start immediately and should be provided continuously, zero separation. So now I thought, if God takes me now, I will rest in peace. And the pandemic came. So everybody had to rest. And I thought no more of it. But nothing came after those policies. Nothing changed. So 2 years ago, I'm kind of feeling I've got to pick up the cudgels again. And I'm busy updating a book we wrote 15 years ago. And it's taking a year longer than I thought to answer your question, because the nurture science was focused on skin-to-skin contact and the baby. The mother was always there, but I never did the deep dive into mother neuroscience. And as I'm doing it, if I give a quick sketch of what I'm saying in this book, yes, for mother, and postpartum depression is a key part of that. But let's go back. A pregnancy brain, the estrogen loosens the connections in the brain, but it creates the potential for new ones.
Loosens them for a purpose.
And so loosed connection and potential for new ones. Now, cortisol is an extremely important hormone of pregnancy, and it's never identified as such. But you need high cortisol in the mother to feed this baby. You need high cortisol in the baby to grow. And so cortisol is extremely high in a mother and a baby. But it's healthy cortisol. And it's got to be very finely controlled. If mother's stress biology is altered from early childhood development, from adolescence, from intimate partner violence, that cortisol control is disrupted. And cortisol releasing hormone has a negative feedback loop to the brain. But the placenta makes cortisol releasing hormone that makes the mother's cortisol higher. And the placenta makes the baby's cortisol higher. And the placenta cortisol releasing hormone is a positive feedback loop. The more cortisol the mother has, the more cortisol it makes for the baby. And so the baby feels mother's emotions and negative emotions totally. It matters a lot how mother comes into pregnancy. It matters a lot in pregnancy to the baby, because the high cortisol in the baby is going to damage its future development. So, bad news, pregnancy brain. Bad news, cortisol biology. Good news. At birth, it is the baby that does the rewiring. Those loosened connections are very specific to the hypothalamus and the hippocampus and the MPOA, which are parenting maternal hormone circuitry, and 4 different sets of parenting systems in the brain. And those, even in a man, will get rewired by a baby. And therefore, the baby actually is the healing agent for the mother. Even if she had early childhood development, even if she's been a victim of intimate partner violence and everything in between from birth until then, there is
maltreatment by her mother.
there is opportunity for restoring stress biology. Very specifically, the MPOA and the hippocampus and the hypothalamus are the cortisol circuitry pathways, and they can be oxytocinized. That's a lay way of saying it, but essentially what it is, that you're putting an oxytocin overlay on those, and you can restore mother. And in the process, yes, you will have less postpartum depression. Yes, you can restore PTSD. Yes, they're all related to each other, and they all have the stress biology disruption. And it's the baby's job to rewire them. And it's not 1 hour. It's a 24-hour job minimum, because there are at least 8 parenting hormone systems that have to be rewired. And it takes a day of zero separation.
Now, a stretch that's maybe too far. Do you think there's any room for skin-to-skin contact with adoptive mothers?
So this has been done, written about, and discussed. And so the answer would be yes. I think the first who wrote about this was a lady called Colleen Gribble in Australia, who adopted a child and did that. And there were very weird, specific, particular behaviors that I would call highly conserved neuroendocrine behaviors, which in English means instinct. And they might have occurred just once or twice, but they were triggering deep memories. And so, yes, this literature is in fact there.
Well, I didn't know that. I'm going to look her up. Last name is Gribble, did you say?
Colleen Gribble, Gribble. And I think she was the first. I think there's other literature too.
Well, is there anything you'd like to say about your work in the light of technology that's coming? Technology that's already with us too.
Yes. I have contributed to an article under review on what are the implications with respect to reproductive in vitro fertilization and surrogacy. And what then happens is that what is technically possible may have ethical implications.
Yes.
And those ethical implications also, in terms of my faith, have greater weighting. So yes, there are dangers. There's a minefield there, if you like. The technology is neither good nor bad. It's us that are good or bad. It's us that use it wisely or unwisely. And so broadly, in terms of skin-to-skin contact, it's not a kind of care. It's a place of care where all technology is welcome. Well, I don't want to be too naive about that, but the technology should be primarily focused on supporting physiology, because that's what the baby's wired to develop with. Yes, then there are diseases. And now we have technology that can deal with diseases at an unimaginable level, fetal surgery and all the rest. And then the resources are infinite eventually for some people, but not for everybody. So yes, there's a whole lot of but staying with perhaps with your question, yes, technology can lead us into tiger country, but the country for the baby is mother's body, mother's chest, is mother's, and yes, it can also be father, and yes, if mother and father have died and you're adopted, it's still mother's body, which is the primary platform for oxytocin as an expression of being safe. The extreme opposite of separation is being safe.
Did you say that your faith would have something to say about this technology?
Yes, I did say it. The technology is not bad or good. It's us. And yes, how are we able to do that? So I spoke about ethics. There's also the human rights approach. And the Convention for the Rights of the Child says the best interests of the child are paramount. If you do ethics with an adult, you have to consider beneficence, non-maleficence, and autonomy and justice. And there's other ethics of prudence and things. And you weigh all of those up. But for a child, there's no autonomy. And so the Convention of the Rights of the Child and the ethicists that have looked at this for 5 or 15, 10 years, they conclude the best interests of the child are paramount. They go above everything else. With surrogacy, that becomes a poor fit. There's very little respect for what's the best interests of the child. With many of our dealing with technology, this not theological or religious or ethical, but human rights, ethical question. What is the best interests of the child? In Sweden, here, my country, where I'm now, parental autonomy overrides what is good for the child. Oh. Is that yes? Well, that's an ethic, but it's an inadequate ethic. With it comes the technology that allows us to make choices, but those are our choices. And then we don't ascribe to the child any autonomy, any validity as a human being. The Convention of the Rights of the Child does so, very much so. And there's a World Association Infant Mental Health that has taken the Convention of the Rights of the Child and fully applied it with respect to the small, totally newborn, even when it's very small and immature, has rights, makes obligations for adults. So this would be the take rather than the technology in itself. Yes, are we in the best interests of the child?
Very easy and increasingly seductive to lose track of the best interests of the child. I hate to sound like such an old codger, but I think maybe many younger people, have a very difficult time thinking about anything other than what is best for them.
And so I'm going to pull a little circle back again. The newborn child in skin-to-skin contact will fix it. So we teach zero separation. And I have a true story from a country that I shall not mention. And this woman came for counseling to my friend. And she says, look, I'm in my career. And this child is interfering with my career. And so my friend asked, well, what happened to you? So she says, well, my two midwives in my private clinic there, they had been listening to Dr. Bergman at a conference. And when my baby was born, they put it in skin-to-skin contact on me.
Oh, boy.
And so my friend had to tell her, you're bonded with your baby. Your baby is bonded with you. Should she apologize for that? Well, now I'm also on an ethical quagmire. But I will defend myself by saying the best interests of the child are paramount. and that mother needs help and support. And our society needs to be able to understand, to support that mother and all other mothers to make the emotional connections with the child. And as I explained the nurture science, that comes with oxytocin, the exact same oxytocin that becomes stronger than cortisol, that makes resilience instead of vulnerability. That resilience is both psychological and physiological. It affects mental health and physical health across the lifespan.
Well, I think that's a wonderful place to end. It's been a very great pleasure for me to spend this time with you, Nils.
Thank you.